Polycystic ovary syndrome, PCOS, just got a rebrand on May 12th, 2026, and it has taken the internet by storm. This name change has been a long time coming. It's been debated in PCOS circles for a very long time, like over a decade. Many people are looking at this name change quite positively, from healthcare providers and scientists to patients and advocates, because the new name is a better representation of what the condition is. But as you can imagine, there's also backlash and criticism, and rightfully so, because the fundamental reality of living with this condition and our understanding of it hasn't changed overnight. What has changed, it's gone from 9 syllables to 15, from polycystic ovary syndrome to polyendocrine metabolic ovarian syndrome. I'm naturopathic Dr. Hussain, and this is Phase to Phase, the Hormone Health Show. Before we get into the politics of it all, the good, the bad, the questionable, and why this name change matters, I'm going to quickly answer 4 questions that people have been Googling frantically this past week since the name change happened, and maybe you've been Googling. Question 1, what does PMOS stand for? PMOS is polyendocrine metabolic ovarian syndrome. I know it's a mouthful. It is the new official medical term for what we have known for the last little while as PCOS, or polycystic ovary syndrome, also known as polycystic ovarian syndrome. Question number 2, why did they change the name from PCOS to PMOS? The term PCOS was reductive and misleading. Polycystic ovaries refer to small follicles that have eggs in them that aren't maturing properly, and then they're gathering in your ovaries, which can also cause them to get a little bit bulkier or higher in volume. So that's the polycystic ovary part. But the thing is, people with PCOS don't have to have polycystic ovaries to have PCOS, and that was one of the biggest issues with this particular name of polycystic ovary syndrome. The new name reflects the nature of the condition a lot better as a full body disorder that involves hormonal regulation. Think testosterone, sex hormone binding globulin, GnRH or gonadotropin releasing hormone. It also tells us about it being a metabolic disorder that has elements of insulin resistance, low-grade inflammation, and increased cardiometabolic risk, as well as ovarian dysfunction, so irregular cycles, not ovulating, and perhaps polycystic ovarian morphology. And this is not the first time it's gone through a name change. PCOS used to be called Stein-Leventhal syndrome. Question number 3. Do I have to get re-diagnosed as having PMOS if I already have a diagnosis of PCOS? The answer is no. If you, like me, have been diagnosed with PCOS, you now simply have PMOS. The condition is the same. It's just the name is different. So if you're relaying it to someone, you're likely going to say PCOS/PMOS. In writing, we're probably going to see things like PMOS brackets, formerly known as or previously known as PCOS. It's going to be messy until especially the guidelines come out, the codes get changed on the background, the communication codes and medical diagnoses. We'll take it in stride. In this episode, you are likely going to hear me use both terms interchangeably as someone with PCOS, but also as someone who has a large patient population that has PCOS. I have said PCOS almost every day of my life for the last 11 years in clinical practice. So it's going to take time. It's all good. Question number 4. Does this new name change my care or treatment plan? And the answer here is not really, because our understanding of the condition and the condition itself has not changed. It's just the name that has changed. That said, you might get slightly different and, fingers crossed, hopefully better care, because we've now changed the name to be better indicative of what's happening in the condition itself. We've put the word metabolic and polyendocrine and taken away the polycystic part of it. So hopefully we're going to have more providers not reduce the condition to only ultrasounds and or menstrual cycles, reproductive function. Now let's get into the million-dollar question of why we're going through the trouble of changing a name that millions of people already know, especially the millions of people who have this diagnosis. And I'm going to take you right to the source. The official announcement came out at the annual Androgen Access and PCOS Society meeting in 2026. The article was published by Helena Teed and colleagues in The Lancet, and here is their exact verbatim rationale for why this was necessary. Polycystic ovary syndrome affects more than 170 million women globally, yet its current name is inaccurate and misleading, obscuring the condition's multisystem, endocrine, and metabolic features, reinforcing stigma, delaying diagnosis, and hindering effective clinical care, research, and policy alignment. And I have to agree, the old name was an inaccurate representation. It reduced a whole body condition to the ovaries alone. This name change wasn't just a few people in a boardroom. It has been debated for a long time, and the research was consolidated in the last little while through massive global surveys and workshops. Terms like endocrine, polyendocrine, metabolic, cardiometabolic, ovulatory, ovarian got majority support. There was some pushback on keeping the term ovarian, ovulatory, reproductive because it doesn't accurately capture all the people with this condition, and it doesn't capture the fact that it's a lifelong issue past menopause, for example. Is PMOS a perfect term? No, most conditions aren't named perfectly. But is it better than before? The answer is yeah, it's a lot better. It is worth noting that even though these were massive global surveys, there was low participation from the global south. So think about countries in Asia, Africa, and South America, where PCOS is actually quite prevalent. I'll leave that there because there's a lot to be said on that front in research in general and how we think about those countries in general. Now, going back to the name itself and how it was workshopped and landed upon, a few options were rejected because of what the acronym would end up being. So, for example, metabolic endocrine reproductive syndrome would come out to be MERS, and we already have a severe respiratory disease called MERS, so that was discarded. Endocrine metabolic ovulatory syndrome was also a top contender. It's very similar to what we ended up with, but the acronym EMOS overlapped too closely with the emo youth subculture, was the comment in the paper, and they ultimately landed on polyendocrine metabolic ovarian syndrome. It conveniently also only changes one letter from PCOS to PMOS. Now let's dive into the pros of this name change from PCOS to PMOS. And there's three big ones for me that we'll get into a little bit more in depth. Number one is the giant spotlight that this name change has put on PCOS, PMOS. It brings immediate attention to the condition's multisystem nature, the rationale for the change, which actually is really important because if doctors, for example, healthcare practitioners, policymakers, research funders are now looking at why this name change happened and reading that paper and all the coverage on it, we'll all start to improve our understanding about what was being missed and how we move forward from here, which is awesome. It has been covered in so many places. I have been seeing it everywhere. And yes, my algorithm is finely tuned to this condition as someone with PCOS and as someone who treats PCOS, PMOS, but still, I've seen it on LinkedIn in fintech spaces and health tech spaces and public health spaces. Influencers are covering it, medical doctors are covering it, other healthcare providers are covering it, advocacy accounts, research and science accounts, supplement accounts, pharmaceutical accounts. There's so many spaces where I have seen this being discussed, which is incredible. So hopefully this instigates a renewed vigor for patient support, awareness, research, and better treatment, which is what we all want. Pro number two. It's a better representation of the condition than polycystic ovary syndrome. PMOS encompasses multiple interacting endocrine and metabolic abnormalities, not just an isolated ovarian disorder, which PCOS kind of implied. And it aligns better with the diagnostic criteria that we have been using. The Rotterdam criteria are what we use, and you have to fit 2 out of 3 minimum of the criteria. Criterion number 1 is irregular cycles, delayed cycles, or signs of anovulation. So essentially, you're not ovulating properly, which is why your cycles are delayed or irregular or MIA completely. Number 2, elevated androgens, either in bloodstream, so high testosterone, high DHEAS, or androstenedione, or you have clinical signs and symptoms, which oftentimes will look like pattern, hair loss on the head, hirsutism, or facial and body hair growth, thick, coarse hair where we typically don't want it, and acne, cystic nodular especially. And the third criterion is the polycystic ovarian morphology on ultrasound and or elevated AMH, which is anti-Müllerian hormone. Anti-Müllerian hormone was only recently added in the guidelines as a diagnostic marker, and it's because when you have immature follicles in your ovaries, that polycystic ovary that we talk about in PCOS or PMOS, those follicles are actually making AMH. So you have to meet 2 out of those 3 criteria, and we also have to rule out anything that might look like PCOS / contribute to those symptoms and signs in your body. Now let's talk about those cysts for a second. Polycystic ovaries never referred to ovarian cysts. They're 2 different things. Polycystic ovaries or polycystic ovarian morphology has always referred to altered folliculogenesis, meaning your follicles that have eggs in them aren't developing properly. And when we visualize them on ultrasound, they look kind of like little cysts. Follicles, they're not developing properly because of hormone signaling that is happening. When we're young, that can actually be part of your learning process for your body of mounting a menstrual cycle. If you're in adolescence, as in you have not reached reproductive maturity, which happens approximately 8 years after your first period ever, it is actually quite common for us to find polycystic ovaries and high AMH, not because something pathological is happening, simply because your hormonal system isn't yet fully in its adulthood. So that's why we don't use that criterion for diagnosis of PCOS, now PMOS, for adolescents. And that criterion really has been the most confusing in general. The term polycystic confuses patients because if you've had a few ovarian cysts in the past, it is very logical for you to think, okay, multiple cysts, I have had those. Poly meaning multiple, cysts meaning cysts or sac-like structures. I've got those. And that's not what the diagnosis is referring to. And that's not what that criterion is referring to. It's referring to immature follicles that aren't growing properly. And they are also making AMH. There's a lot more AMH because there's a lot more follicles hanging out. So the name PMOS is a way better representation than reducing it to the polycystic ovaries that not everyone in PCOS or PMOS has or had. Then we have to talk about the addition of the polyendocrine because there are multiple hormones that are involved at the level of the brain, at the level of the ovary, and in between. So that is a better representation of what's happening. The metabolic component, we know that PMOS is associated with increased risk of gestational diabetes, type 2 diabetes, fatty liver, cholesterol problems, high blood pressure, insulin resistance that is driving the condition in so many of us, more than 70% of us, and heart attacks and stroke. And pro number 3 has to do with the power of language and the benefits of using terminology that is a better descriptor for what's happening. We all know that words have power and language matters. And especially when it's a medical diagnosis, we also really start identifying with it. We've actually seen name changes in medical conditions in the recent past, actually quite a few of them. Some of it is because our understanding has shifted. Some of it is to move away from a word that has a negative connotation. Sometimes it's because we're looking for a better descriptor, like in this case of PCOS to PMOS. So 2 examples I'll share are number 1, POI, so premature ovarian insufficiency. That actually used to be called premature ovarian failure. The second one is metabolic dysfunction associated steatotic liver disease, say that 10 times, which was non-alcoholic fatty liver disease. And it's because we wanted to be more specific in our language and not just call it non-alcoholic As a side note, metabolic dysfunction associated steatotic liver disease is actually quite common in PCOS, now PMOS. But going back to the words have power bit, having a common language that is more reflective of a condition between patients, healthcare providers, policymakers, insurance providers, drug makers, researchers, scientists, and the people allocating funding for research and everything else, it's important. Moving beyond reproductive health and fertility that was in PCOS, it opens doors that maybe weren't open before. It allows us to utilize treatments that fall more in the metabolic space now, an area where we actually have had a lot of progress over time. So those are some of the pros. Now let's move to some of the criticisms, the cons, and the questions. Number 1, was this change necessary from PCOS to PMOS? Short answer, no, especially for those of us who have been treating PCOS/PMOS for a long period of time and have kept up with the research and understand the breadth and the scope of the condition. We already knew it was metabolic. We already knew it was polyendocrine. And we already knew a lot of the things that aren't captured in the main, like its lifelong nature, like the mental health components, like the comorbidities, right? Like all of those things we already knew. So that doesn't change much on that front, but hopefully it will change in general and get better over time for everybody. PCOS/PMOS patients have historically been dismissed, gaslit, underdiagnosed, and received inadequate care, quite often being reduced to their fertility or body size. A new name really doesn't fix that broken system where we don't believe people and we have an under-resourced system too, which is part of the problem. If family doctors are unaware of the impacts of PCOS/PMOS and aren't referring out to specialists in Canada, we have a gatekeeping sort of system. If we're only talking about 1 or 2 things in a patient visit, then that structure doesn't allow for doctors and patients to actually talk about the breadth of their symptoms or even have time to answer questions properly. So that system still needs work and change. Number 2, does it change your care? No, not really. Our understanding hasn't changed overnight. Hopefully it will change and it will get better and we'll see more cohesion in how we move forward. But ultimately, at this point in time, it changes not much. We still have to get broader dissemination of information, better understanding of the condition itself, which I think and hope that this name change will shine a light on. PMOS is rooted in multiple factors like your genetics, epigenetics, geography, access to healthcare, environment, education, finances, and all of the things, the medical factors and the non-medical factors. Ultimately, we still need to treat it like a multifaceted and multifactorial lifelong condition and really meet patients where they're at in their life journey and with their goals in mind and not have them slip through the cracks. Number 3 has to do with resource allocation when we are studying a medical condition. What I mean by this is when we have a medical condition, especially a complex one, where we haven't found a quote cure, unquote, there's a lot of talk about how we need to find an answer. But when we study a condition, we actually do need to look at it from multiple directions and not in just a linear model. And this happens even when we get more social science type of research on a condition, like studying partners of people with PCOS or something along those lines. Really, we want research from all directions because it actually helps us understand risk factors. It helps us understand which treatment applies to whom. How can we support you? People who don't respond well, and also like what are the things that are non-medical that are impacting you. All of these things matter. This is a criticism that I saw online, so I'm responding to it here more than anything else. This money and resources, we could have spent it on treatment, on more advocacy. But this is part of advocacy and this is part of awareness for sure. And I think it is going to put us on a better path. And I want us all to remember that our understanding of a multifaceted chronic health condition requires studying it from a logical and economic lens. You can't separate the disease from the human experiencing it or the environment that they're experiencing it in. We can't ignore the psychosocial toll, the relationship strain, the economic burden, the health disparities, because that just perpetuates the exact medical gaslighting and dismissal that many of us have faced for decades. So studying all these different things is important, and progress isn't always linear and in the direction that you want it to go, but it does move us. I think this name change moves us forward. Number 4, what does this transition cost us? Which populations are we excluding or have we not thought about as much as we should have and we've historically left out? And how do we do better by them, those populations that always get missed? We still have ovarian in the name. It's a step in the right direction, but it's not perfect. I am wondering about grassroots organizations, advocacy groups, marginalized communities who have spent time gathering or creating resources or training algorithms or putting out advocacy efforts. Like if we think about it, the algorithmic shift is likely going to be messy, and these are the groups and communities that are going to get the shorter end of the stick. Is that the phrase? Shortest stick? You get what I'm saying, hopefully. And unfortunately, these are probably also the organizations and groups and communities who are underrepresented in the name change and in global data in general. And especially when we think of how this is a multifaceted condition, and there are so many things that are dictated by non-medical factors. And some of these have to do with your postal code policies that you have no hand in making. And then my other thought has to do with the exploitation piece. Will we see bad actors? Yes, the answer is yes. There's always bad actors. My mind is always thinking about those things, unfortunately, because there is so much grifting online these days. And nowadays, you don't even know if it's a real human or not. It's unfortunate that bottom lines are more important than people. Industries, corporations trying to profiteer off this change. Corporate profiteering will have an impact on your health and your cost of living. When there's no political transparency, it affects us all. And these are also some of the things that I really want us to think about. Currently, we are seeing a stripping away of checks and balances. Environmental protections being stripped away will have an impact on your health. In Ontario, we are privatizing healthcare. I really want to encourage you to write and speak and advocate and really become more aware of your local and national politics. All of this affects all of us, including your PCOS/PMOS care. All right, we'll leave it at that. So those are some of my thoughts about this name change. Some of them need more sussing out. I've tried to stay away from a lot of the conversation online so that it wouldn't influence what I had to say first. I'm sure there's lots of things that I've missed. I'm going to record an episode after September 2026, after PCOS, now PMOS Awareness Month happens. And I'm going to go and explore what else is online, what people are saying, talk to different people, including scientists and practitioners and patients and advocacy groups, and bring that episode to you in the fall in season 2 of Phase to Phase. Before I end this episode, I do want to share a little bit about what their rollout strategy is going to look like based on that Lancet paper. And they outline a 3-year implementation strategy, and I'm going to read that. So it includes multilingual resources for patients, integration into electronic health records, formal engagement with the World Health Organization to get this adopted into the International Classification of Diseases, the ICD codes. They're managing this transition so that the new framework is fully integrated into the 2028 update of the international guidelines, which are used in 195 countries. So the PCOS guidelines were last updated in 2023. They typically happen every 5 years. So the PMOS guidelines are going to be updated in 2028. We'll also have more research by that point in time, which will be great. Those guidelines are pretty comprehensive, and they take into account like all different levels of PCOS care. I'm incredibly curious to see what the next couple of years look like in general, in terms of implementation, the update to the guidelines, and also like the feedback that is gathered from different kinds of organizations and people and groups. I'm going to be talking more about this topic in the fall. Until then, we keep advocating, we keep the most important person in mind, which is you, regardless of the acronym, PCOS or PMOS. The most important parts of this whole conversation are you, your health, and your care. Remember that. Make sure to send this episode to someone who would benefit from hearing it, a relative, a colleague, or even someone on your healthcare team. I'd love to know what you're thinking, what your thoughts, comments, questions, concerns, criticisms are. Send me a message on Instagram or LinkedIn, or reach out through my website over at phase2phase.ca.